So for some context, this all started in 7th grade. Me and one of my friends were really into Hetalia. We weren't super weebish, but we weren't innocent of the charge. It was actually a lot of fun, making it so that I could make a lot more friends even though I had just moved there. Me and her cosplayed it well. I Russia and she America. So we often refer to each other as that. Yeah, it was sort of weebish, but it was all in good fun. We had our own little Hetalia group consisting of 3 people: Russia, America, and Germany, and a few people that hadn't even seen the show. But hey, drink the Kool-Aid. It wasn't long before I met a guy who we'll call Gilbert, who actually seemed to be intelligent and relatively okay guy. He was kind of short and a bit skinny, but I wasn't about to judge since I used to be teased about being tall instead of short. As I talked to him, I learned that he watched Italia as well, which was very exciting, and that he cosplayed as Prussia. I put that in quotation marks because he wasn't an actual cosplayer, but to be fair, most of us weren't. We were young and just didn't have the budget. Me, America, and Gilbert actually became quite close. We eventually moved to a bigger group that took up 2 tables, most of which identified with a country name. To this day, that makes me cringe. It even got to the point where I had people approaching me asking me to join the countries club. It was a lot of fun though. Another notable person that joined our group was another guy we'll call France, since that's who he identified with. I never thought much of him until he started to grope me and a few other girls at our table. I came forward and confronted him, but he denied it. Any other confrontations he would blame on his French side. In short, he had already established himself as a creep. Compared to Gilbert though, he was a saint. We used to talk a lot through Facebook, which was actually a lot of fun. I was always excited when we would all get together. As time went on though, he sent me a message asking me out. I declined, and 5 minutes later I got a message from America saying that her and Gilbert were now dating. That was just in bad taste, and it left her feeling like shit for a long time. Still, things weren't that bad. That is until summer came along where he groped me several times, which I was really fucking uncomfortable with. After a while, we started role-playing. Today I am a pretty active role-player, but at the time I barely knew what it was. Still, I played along, typically playing either Russia or Hungary because I related to her. It was all very awkward and very cringeworthy, but it was all fun and games. Me and America logged off that night and went to bed. When I logged back in the morning, I found a full chat log where Gilbert and France were pretending to rape me in America. Not our characters, mind you, going as far to use our actual names. I never said anything about it because I was sort of scared. I was only 13 after all. The next year rolls around and we're in 8th grade. Me and Gilbert rode the same bus, which I was actually relieved for. I'm actually a very anxious person, so a familiar face wasn't that bad. Plus, I still considered him a friend. The thing with Gilbert is that, while me and my other friends only identified with our characters, he was convinced he was literally Prussia. He constantly quoted him, spoke like him, referred to himself as that. I would say he was kin, but not only did we not know what that was, but that'd be an insult to actual kin people. Time went on though, and I became increasingly uncomfortable. Too much touching and all, too much groping, and I wasn't digging it. Still, I always laughed it off because I didn't want to make a big fuss. Besides, what if nobody believed me? Gilbert became more and more aggressive, taking out on me and America. When confronted about it, he would blame it on his Prussia side. Time went on and he came forward to tell me that he wasn't actually human, but a half-demon son of Satan, here to save us all. Yeah, I wasn't buying that, and I wasn't sure what to say. I just sort of nodded and looked away. He also told me that Italy, his ex-girlfriend, who was a total sweetheart, was an evil succubus. A month later, he told me I was actually an angel that needed protecting. Now let's do a comparison. He's 5'6", 110 pounds with a big head. I'm 5'9", 180 pounds with a regular head. So that was bullshit, but whatever. The point was that I was getting freaked out. There were many times that he said that he loved me and shit like that, continuing to harass me even when I straight up told him to stop. I later learned he was abusing America, and blaming it on his demon side. I told her she should break up with him because it was getting dangerous, and she agreed. A whole other mess spun out from that, which I won't delve into because it's pretty confusing. Eventually me, Germany, who I'm still close with to this day, America and a few other people formed a new friend group that was actually a lot of fun. Gilbert had been excommunicated from our little Church of Italia, and there was also an opposing cult to Gilbert's, and I find it pretty hilarious but also confusing. He continued to give me notes. And by notes I mean 6-letter essays typed in the print in the smallest possible font, telling me that this was all wrong and stuff like that. At the end of the year, though, he gave me an apology. The apology wasn't just text, though. It was covered with Italia anime clip art and fan art. When I showed it to my friends, we all had a huge laugh about it. Eventually he moved, but occasionally we'd see him on the internet, where we can see him role-playing the most cringy stuff ever imagined as Prussia. Sorry if this is not as serious or long or whatever, but I felt this was a pretty terrible story. That and I love your videos. To be honest though, when I look back at it, I can't help but laugh at some of the parts.